Hello, I'm John Feldt, and this is the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Water Outlook for December 30th, 2012. Here's the rainfall last week, and I think if you look at the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, you can recognize that that's a pattern that's been going on now for over a month, extending a little bit more into the central part of the state of California and not quite as active over the Pacific Northwest, but still a fairly soaking rain and snow in higher elevations, 2 to 4 inches of rain, higher amounts of snow up in the mountains. The biggest news last week was the soaking and widespread rainfall over the southeast U.S. and then on the northern edge, a band of snow. This was the area in yellow here was 2 to 4 inches of rain, even little pockets of 5 inches of rain in red. And along the northern periphery of that, that was in the form of snow. That area, for the most part, has been wet in Mississippi and Alabama and dry in Georgia. So we're pretty close to the potential for flooding in parts of Mississippi and Alabama. But Georgia, it produced a fairly widespread soaking and beneficial rain. Now, if we look at the percent of normal for the last 7 days, we see that the snow and rain was above normal over large parts of the eastern third of the nation, scattered parts over the western part of the nation, and generally drier over the central part of the nation. And that has been generally a trend that we've seen through most of the month of December. Now, I'm going to be talking more and more about snow as we get into the winter months, very similar to the tropical season. During those months, I focus on snow during the winter months. And what we have here is the snow depth over the nation, and it's really increased. It's pretty quiet up until towards the middle part of December, and then it expanded fairly significantly over the last couple weeks of December. Currently about 60% of the nation with some degree of snow, and this was a band that occurred last week over the parts of the southern U.S. into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. 2 to 4 inches of snow and heavier amounts in pockets. Matter of fact, there were blizzard conditions up over the Ohio parts of the Ohio Valley with significant snow as well as wind-driven snow. So the water equivalent is what we're going to have to keep an eye on very closely. And this is the equivalent of water, obviously, that's in that snowpack. And when that melts, that will have an impact on water resources. Could be an impact beneficially if it occurs over parts of the drought, or it could be flood as we get into the spring months. But what you can see in that darker purple, that's over getting close to 2 inches. And so we are getting a decent amount of snow cover and water equivalent, and that's over areas of drought. Now, soils, as we've mentioned over and over again, soils are very dry. This shows the area of soil that is the driest. And I wanted to point out over the month of December, and I'm going to be talking about this in my newsletter this week, is that there have been some significant improvements during the month of December. I've outlined in blue areas that have snow on the ground, that 2 inches of snow, and look where that's over. That's over an area that's in a deep and prolonged drought. Now, it's holding that snow because it's very cold right now, but when that melts an inch or two, maybe a little higher in spots, will help to alleviate drought impacts in that region. Now, unfortunately, it needs 5-6 inches of precipitation in that region to really get out of the drought, so 2 inches is not going to totally eliminate the drought, but it will put a sizable dent in it in that region. Likewise, over the southeast U.S. in the areas of white dashed lines, there's been significant improvement. And actually, it's been very significant over parts of that area, especially north and parts of central Georgia and the east central part of Alabama, where there's 2 to 3 inches of rain. And again, that needs about 6 inches of rain, but 2 or 3 inches goes a long way to help drought impacts in that region. And we see that on stream flow across the nation. We see that parts of Georgia now are in green, so the mean weekly stream flow in some spots has come up to normal. It's still low. It will recede back into below normal, but we are seeing some signs now of getting water into streams due to enhanced runoff. The areas in blue are vulnerabilities should heavy rain or snow fall, and those rivers are running above normal, and we see parts of Mississippi, Alabama, Parts of the far western U.S. and parts of the northeast U.S. right now is streamflow above normal. And again, should we get heavy rain or snow in those areas, there could be enhanced vulnerability for flooding. Now, for many weeks now, you're probably getting tired of me talking about the Arctic Oscillation. As I've said before, the reason I focus on that in winter is because that is often the driving factor on precipitation trends in the medium term or medium range, and especially during a year like this where we're in an ENSO neutral pattern. This is really pretty much what we have to go on looking at the medium range precipitation. Now, for quite a while now, since November, we've been in a pattern here of a negative Arctic Oscillation. We've had, here's one dip, here's two dips, here's three dips, and now we're getting up close to neutral, and the models are forecasting that we're going to be getting into a positive phase of the Arctic Oscillation as we get into January. I mentioned last week that that's not surprising, even from a standpoint of that these oscillations do tend to fluctuate on the order of 2 to 3 weeks, and we've been in that negative for quite some time, so we were overdue to get back into positive. Now, if you look back on other positive phases, they generally don't stay in the positive phase as long during winter as that negative phase, because cold air does like to sink south this time of year. But that is going to be the next trend, and we see that on a jet stream analysis for this week. Early in the week, we see the jet stream dipping south. Cold air still pushing into this middle part of the nation. We have some energy ejecting out of the southwest U.S., but then later in the week, look at the primary position of the jet stream. This is the primary position. It's lifted well to the north by the end of the week. Now, we still have some remnants of a southwest jet stream, and that will produce chances of precipitation over the southern U.S., but it's much weaker than the primary jet stream. So the message this week is the primary jet stream will be lifting up to the north, and that's right in line with that phase of the Arctic Oscillation going from negative to positive. Another way to look at this are pressure anomalies, and basically blue means that colder air has sunk south and pressures are lower. Reds mean that it's pushed up to the north. And midweek, what you can see is that there's still a dipping over the southwest U.S. with these blue dashed lines showing blue anomalies, saying that it's colder than normal. But look at the end of the week, this week. The jet stream here has shifted well up to the north, and here's that southern part of the jet. And we see those red dashed lines, and that means that we've gone over to a positive type anomalies, and generally that means milder temperatures, and with the jet stream lifting up to the north, less active weather over parts of the nation, especially the southern parts of the nation. Now, that southwest jet stream, sometimes that can be very active, and it could become active again, but right now it looks like it's going to be pretty weak and not produce a lot of precipitation. So this week we have one system to look at for the most part, and that will be digging into the southwest U.S. along that southern jet stream along the transition, and then lifting up towards the northeast, and you can see the heaviest rain in purple. Right now it looks like it's going to be falling over southern parts of Mississippi, Alabama that haven't received as much rain as the northern part, so it might be more of a soaking rain with just isolated flooding. Any rain in Georgia would still be a beneficial rain, as well as into the Carolinas. The mid part of the nation remains pretty dry, and Texas is pretty critical. We saw last week an area of rain that moved more into the central part of the state, and I think there could be a little bit more rain in the central part of Texas that we saw not last week but prior weeks. That would be very welcome, but I still think the core of heaviest rain will be far eastern Texas, like we've seen that trend for quite some time. Looking further ahead, it looks like there will be a break after this early to midweek system for about 5 to 7 days, and then perhaps another system moving along the southerly branch towards the end of the first week in January, first full week, around the 9th to 11th of January, but that's way out there. Okay, so trends and threats this week. Pronounced area of dry weather over the north central U.S. We have an early week band of some generally light snow over the middle part of the nation up into the northeast, and then that precipitation area over the Gulf Coast states. Elsewhere, there might be some precipitation in the form of rain or snow, but it's going to be light. So the takeaway points from this week's weekly water outlook: we will be transitioning from a negative to a positive Arctic oscillation that will be providing the impacts and the trends for precipitation as we get into the early part of January. There will be a rain-snow event this week over the middle part of the nation, mid-Atlantic, and the Gulf Coast states. Overall, once we transition into this positive Arctic oscillation, I think it's going to lead towards a milder and quieter period, and then less precipitation over the Pacific Northwest. I will be updating issuing my newsletter towards the middle of this week. I will be issuing the monthly precipitation reports for those of you that get that earlier this week. And I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and I will be talking with you again next week.